In the northeast sector, we're having the conversation locally about the extension of SkyTrain and the Evergreen Line up into the Tri-Cities. We're waiting for TransLink to come with their third of the money, the province and the federal government. We've delivered our money, but it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to build these rapid transit extensions of SkyTrain or other technologies in the future without having those density targets met. The city of Port Moody, I know they developed their entire business plan and their development plan over the coming 20 years based on having the SkyTrain extension, as has the city of Coquitlam. City of Coquitlam, around Coquitlam Centre Shopping Mall, they have 19 new towers coming, and it's all the density is built around. So these things have to be sistered together. They have to be brought together in terms of assessment to make sure that these things are done properly. And maybe an adjacent issue, as I also think small businesses have to be brought in. You know, when the Canada Line was built, obviously it impacted a lot of the small businesses along the route, along Cambie, and people were impacted by that. When these things are coming forward, I think it's incumbent on all levels of government, all representatives in those communities, to work together and to think about the impacts of these things, and to think about these in a more holistic way than we often do in the past, whereas you have often the federal government providing money, the provinces providing money, TransLink looking at how we can pay for and subsidize ridership going forward. But everybody coming together and thinking about this from 10,000 feet and what the impact of this will be on the region in terms of density growth and opportunities, and what the impact will be on existing homeowners who are looking maybe to downsize, sell their homes and retire, and what those transit impacts may or may not be, is an important part of the equation that often isn't taken into consideration and isn't given, I think, enough public debate and scrutiny. So when we have these one-off moments, like the building of the Canada Line and now the building of the Evergreen Line, that we should take that not just as a one-off debate that needs to be assessed within the context of that one project, but it has to be more broadly thought of as a learning lesson, to have a structured process within specifically, I think, TransLink, to bring people together and to talk about these impacts and what they will mean for everybody.
Thank you.
Well, I think this question raises a really good point and an example of how things actually do work or don't work. You know, we see federal, provincial governments making major announcements about transit or whatever, and sometimes it seems very unilateral. It seems very, you know, just kind of one-off. It's often pegged to an election, a promise or something. And so I think what underlies this question is the need to have much more of a collaborative planning process. Now, I'm not in favor of the federal government just unilaterally saying, you know, if you get transit money, you have to do X, Y, or Z. What I am in favor of is, as part of a national housing strategy, that we would have regional strategies developed, that Metro Vancouver, just to use our own region as an example, would be at the table and actually figuring that out. So you're making holistic decisions. You're making decisions that incorporate where funds for public transit go, where you're developing housing, where you're developing office space. And I think Metro Vancouver and the individual municipalities have done an incredible job. It's not like they need to be dragged to the table. They're at the table. The problem is the table has had a missing participant, and that's the federal government. So I'd like to reframe that question and say, can we agree that there should be a national strategy that allows us to do that? It's not going to happen just out of the blue. It actually takes a commitment and a follow-through and an implementation with some rules about timelines and so on to do that. And if we can't buy into that, then I think this debate is just going to go on forever. And no matter how good Metro Vancouver tries to do its stuff, unless they've got that partnership with the federal government and a way to carry it out, then unfortunately we're not going to make much progress. So that's what I think is the challenge before us in this election.
Well, I think the word stipulating, the federal government stipulating, is actually the one that concerns me. If you're going to create partnerships, it's time we made the municipal governments of this country true partners, not telling them what to do by giving them money, because we're not. We're working in partnership. Everyone has got an equal place at the table and an equal voice to talk about and negotiate how we do things. That's the only way it's ever going to work if we start a national housing initiative or national housing strategy. The issue of densifying, the issue of businesses, which is a municipal issue, we need to be able to put that at the table and have real partners. As you know, in the Paul Martin government, we created a Privy Council office to deal with cities. We showed that as an intent that we were going to treat cities as equal levels of government. We also had at the table the fact that we transfer money currently into provinces, which is not a way to work. Provinces have a BC Housing Authority and they do their own thing, and we have no strings attached to it. So bringing about the partnerships is the only way we'll be able to talk about some of these issues that you're talking about. Otherwise, we're imposing again, and I think the time has come when the federal government has got to be an equal partner with the other levels of government and not just impose or download and say, I mean, again, the Conservative government cancelled the City Secretariat and the Privy Council. They cancelled the concept of housing. I mean, they obviously kept the gas tax that the federal government had started to give to cities, but we need to increase that. We need to not tell cities when they come to you, go to the provincial government and beg on your bended knee. It's about equality and a partnership that's going to create for us a housing strategy and bringing to the table other players like non-profit societies and private sector.
Some of you may remember that I actually stood up for the small businesses along Candy Street with the building of the Canada Line. And I did so because there was no fair, transparent process prior to the decision to build that line. It was a quick decision. The community's priorities, the Metro Vancouver priorities, was the northeast sector. It was the Evergreen Line. And that's where the planning had gone into. So this was a rushed decision based on the 2010 games. And businesses were really left high and dry, and there wasn't a lot of thought into the planning of that line. I mean, I'm in that area quite a lot, so I see the lack of density of housing. So number one, it's really important that decisions that are particularly involving huge investment on the part of government have really thorough public conversation, real consultation, not just come in and tell us what color you're supposed to paint something, which I saw around the gateway projects. I mean, it was not real consultation. And the partners, all partners involved, sit down at the table. Now, what makes sense is that all partners, from the funding level of the federal government, which we think should be upped, on housing, on transit, in particular, on other forms of transportation, which was your additional question, so walking and cycling paths as well. But that would be transfers to the municipal level. They would bear the responsibility of making sure the planning is done. But the partnerships really should try and address the question of, is this going to provide the best, most efficient use of the money that's being invested in this project that will increase the livability of the community, that will increase other goals. So obviously investment of money in a very narrow corridor development of transit requires density of development around it. It would make sense to link that to the investment of federal government in affordable housing or non-market housing in that area too.
Thank you very much.